It was thought that they were perfect together for years, the respected judge and the charming motivational speaker. Though there were smiles and walks on the red carpet, Judge Faith Jenkins couldn't keep quiet any longer because the truth was so painful and real. She finally tells Kenny Lattimore, the man she once called her love, about the lies, betrayal and heartbreak that ended their marriage when she was 47 years old. If you look from the outside, you won't believe what happened. There was a lot going on between Judge Faith Jenkins and Kenny Lattimore, a famous TV figure who is known for being smart and elegant. Judge Faith had made a name for herself as a strong, smart and caring lady. But Kenny was an R&B singer who was nominated for a Grammy and loved for his soulful singing and friendly personality. They were the picture of black love, class and success when they were together. Someone or something that people looked up to, especially in public. It was big news on blogs and magazines when they got married in March 2020. It was beautiful to see Faith walk down the aisle in her white dress, and Kenny looked just like the perfect man. There were a lot of happy posts on social media. Their fans went crazy over the pictures. The wedding was lovely, classy and small. It was attended by famous people, influential people and friends who thought they were seeing the start of a fairy tale. Behind the scenes, though, no one saw the pressure building up or the cracks starting to show almost right away after the I do. Faith wasn't just any wife, you see. Structure, success and high standards were important to her. And Kenny? Well, Kenny had some bad habits that didn't quite fit in with the strict world Judge Faith lived in. People who knew about it say that there were danger signs from the start. Judge Faith kept getting better at her job by producing law shows, appearing on daytime TV, and mentoring young women. On the other hand, Kenny, who was still good at music, was said to be feeling bad about living in Judge Faith's shadow. At the height of his fame in the early 2000s, Faith's star was still growing quickly. One person who knows them well said that their relationship was tense when they weren't together but great when they were. They were able to keep up the image because they were both good at public speaking. But now comes the crazy part. Even when they were having the best times together in public, Judge Faith was still wondering if she had made the right choice. Seeing how hard she tried to make it work makes this story even more sad. Reports say she kept giving him chances and pushed him to go to therapy, talk to people and get spiritual help. Things didn't get better though, things got worse instead. Now this is where things get interesting. This is because no one would have known what was going on until Faith herself spoke out. But what did she really reveal? What lies did people say Kenny Lattimore was hiding the whole time? Wait for the next part where we'll talk about the shocking things that Judge Faith finally brought to light. And trust me, it changes everything you thought you knew about how they met and fell in love. Judge Faith tried to keep quiet at first. She had always thought it was important to keep her home safe and private issues out of the public eye. But sometimes the weight of silence is too much to bear, especially if it starts to make you feel less peaceful. Behind the scenes, Faith started to notice small but consistent red flags that pointed to something more serious that she couldn't ignore any longer. Friends who knew Kenny well say that there were times when what he did didn't match what he said. He made it seem like he was on her side and believed in her drive, vision and desire. It was different when they were alone though. Kenny supposedly became distant, bossy, and overly sensitive to anything that wasn't about him, according to sources. Someone who worked there but didn't want to be named said he wanted to be seen as the head of the family, but didn't want to do the work that came with it. Judge Faith made the money, planned things, and looked out for everyone, and that started to make her feel bad. But Faith reportedly took the biggest blow when she found out that Kenny had not been completely honest about some money issues. Even though Kenny wasn't charged with cheating or breaking the law, it was said that he kept lies about shared assets and spending habits. He would say that he would pay the bills, get rid of debts, and make sure that certain chances would come up. But behind her back, things didn't always make sense. Due to her strong sense of right and wrong, Faith started to dig, and what she found shocked her. She is said to have found false financial papers, canceled meetings that he said he was at, and discrepancies in the way they talked about planning their future together. This is where it gets really deep. Kenny allegedly got defensive instead of sorry when Faith confronted him. Instead of being honest or sorry, he reportedly put the blame on her, called her controlling, and even asked her to prove her loyalty. For Judge Faith, this was the moment when things changed. It hit her that she had built her life and marriage on trust, honesty, and working together. Those three things started to fall apart, and the idea that they were married perfectly fell apart too. What came next will blow your mind. Because just when Judge Faith thought she had seen everything, she found one last lie that she could no longer hide or protect. Judge Faith Jenkins tried to keep things calm for months behind closed doors. She said a prayer. She thought. Women she looked up to and trusted gave her advice. But as the relationship affected her more, she felt something change in her spirit. You see, Faith wasn't just having trouble communicating or having a rough time in her marriage. In a relationship where she was supposed to feel seen and appreciated, she was having a hard time accepting that her truth was being shut down. The breaking point wasn't a public meltdown or a screen fight. It came to her late at night, when she was sitting alone and looking at herself in the mirror. She couldn't understand how a woman who helped others find clarity and justice on national TV could feel so lost and unheard in her own home. People who are close to Judge Faith say that the last straw was a series of hurtful actions. Kenny allegedly started to gaslight her by questioning her reality, playing down her worries, and even changing the words she used. He changed from being sorry to being cold and distant in an instant. It was combat of the mind. Someone who knew him said that he made her feel bad for asking questions. He would brush off her feelings and then act like nothing had happened. Even worse, Kenny was said to have started taking advantage of her public image by using her name and platform to get chances for himself, without telling her or setting clear limits. From business meetings to financial choices, he made everything on his own, but her reputation helped him. That thought hurt a lot. It was no longer just about the marriage. It was about Faith, identity, and leaving a legacy being broken. Faith's feelings had been hurt enough, and this is where things became public. In an interview with careful wording, Judge Faith finally spoke out. However, she did not name any names when she talked about the silent pain of strong women who are supposed to keep everything together while being slowly torn apart behind the scenes. She talked about what it costs to act like everything is fine, and how it hurts you to keep quiet to protect someone who never protected you. Her words were honest and strong. Walking away is sometimes the greatest thing you can do. It's not because you're weak, but because you finally understand that your peace is more important than what other people think. The web went crazy. Fans were shocked. Some people stood up for Kenny and said he had always seemed like a good person. Others were happy that Faith finally spoke up. Now though, this is where things get interesting. Kenny didn't say anything in answer. Nothing said in public, nothing argued against, just silence. And the quiet made people think even more. What did they really do to each other? Why did such a cold distance end a marriage that began with so much hope? And why did Kenny, the man who used to heap praise on her, suddenly stop talking? When the judge video clip, as soon as Faith Jenkins spoke her truth, news spread like a spark on dry grass. Social media went crazy. The same sites that once praised her fairy tale wedding to R&B singer Kenny Lattimore were now breaking down everything she said and, more importantly, what he didn't say. On one side, Kenny fans were shocked and trying to figure out what was going on. Who could be at the heart of such a painful story if they sang about love, faith, and friendship? People of religion on the other side were rising in support, especially women, who saw a reflection of their own silent pain in her strength. It was so big that you won't believe it. The story was told on blogs. Podcasts started to look at her talk word for word. The big question was asked by even mainstream news sources. Who tells the story when a relationship ends? The one who talks or the one who goes away? But people didn't see this. Behind the scenes, Judge Faith was dealing with both sadness and shame. Even though the breakup was upsetting, the way people seemed to see it hurt more. Some people didn't like that she aired her dirty clothes. Some people thought she might have done something wrong. This is where it hurts. Sources close to the couple said Kenny supposedly made himself look like the victim in private, telling their common friends that he did his best but couldn't handle her strong personality. It was a quiet effort to make him look better while letting her handle the public backlash. I can tell you that story didn't sit well with Faith. She knew what was true. She knew about the late nights, the pushy behavior, and the mental wall building. She knew what it was like to keep defending herself only to be met with blank stares. She knew what it was like to be married and feel completely alone. What did she do? She stopped talking again, but this time it wasn't because she was scared or embarrassed. This silence was planned. She went back to her goal. She worked even harder at her job. She started new projects that put women's views front and center, and little by little she started to take back her story. A close friend said that Faith didn't want this to become a news story, but she also didn't want her name to be used against her. She had to figure out how to tell the truth without emotional trickery, which was what hurt her in the first place. This is where the story changed. In a quiet moment of thought during a panel talk about women in leadership roles and emotional strength, Faith said something that was heard all over the internet. People who sing love songs aren't necessarily good at loving in real life. Boom. It wasn't loud. It wasn't exciting, but it was honest, sharp, and clear. And with that one phrase, Judge Faith changed the story. She didn't need to say bad things about Kenny. She didn't have to tell all of her secrets. The world finally heard her when she spoke with ease and power. Still, what really happened in that marriage is still a question. What kind of lies did she mean? Were they betrayals of trust, financial lies, cheating, or something even more sinister? This is where things get tough. There was a lot of talk about them for months after they quietly broke up. It wasn't until Judge Faith Jenkins herself used words like lying, betrayal, and broken trust that the internet really went crazy. She didn't sound mean. It was worn out. It was not a play. It was real, which made it stronger. What were the lies then? We need to look at it piece by piece to figure out why Faith, a woman known for her kindness and accuracy, finally spoke out. One is the lie of being emotionally open. A poised TV judge with a sharp mind, and a soulful R&B singer, known for songs that made hearts melt on the outside, looked like they were made to be together. But people who know the couple well say very different things when they're not together. People say Kenny knew how to be present without being close. He showed up in the real world, but inside he was a ghost. The conversations were on the surface. Things that were important were brushed off, and when Faith would talk about her wants or feelings, she was often met with spiritual avoidance or stone silence. One person said it straight out. He hid behind the fact that he was a good guy. He never hurt her, but the fact that he wasn't there was evil in its own way. It took time for Faith to feel more like a roommate than a wife, because her mental needs weren't met. From the outside, that kind of mental abandonment isn't always clear, but it still leaves scars. 2. The back lie. People didn't think this one would hit so hard. A lot of people thought that Kenny fully backed Faith's successful TV and legal careers, but friends said that behind the scenes, things were different. People who were there say there were small signs of jealousy. In private, people said things that put down her success or made her question her goals. Some even said that Kenny wanted her to stay out of the press after they got married and focus on being his peacemaker instead of following her dreams. Take that in. It is said that a famous musician who got his start by singing about love and weakness had a hard time celebrating his wife's strength when it was too strong. Friends, that's not love, that's pride. In a recent podcast, Faith said sometimes you realize someone didn't fall in love with you. They fell in love with the version of you that made them feel most in control. This is a hint at the third lie, which is the promise of forever. During the early years of their marriage, Kenny talked a lot about starting a family, growing in faith together, and living life with Faith. In her own time, though, Faith began to understand that many of those promises were empty words, said for the cameras or the fans but never kept. In the end of talks about plans for the future, whether it was kids or ministry goals, she said people would often give vague answers, break promises, or say they never said anything. It's hard to build a relationship with someone who doesn't want to deal with the real world. Later, Faith thought about it. The most heartbreaking part was that Faith really believed in their marriage. She went into it with trust, respect, and hope, so when those hopes were dashed, it wasn't just disappointing, it was devastating. A close friend or family member says Faith tried to ignore the lies. She prayed, went to counseling, and kept quiet to protect his reputation. But the lies, even the small ones, got too loud to ignore. This story is different because it's not about cheating, abuse, or scandalous news. That kind of heartbreak that grows slowly, as love dies in a room full of silence, pride, and unspoken anger. But this wasn't the end for Faith. This is where fate took a sudden turn. After months of silence, whispers, and emotional fights behind the scenes, Judge Faith Jenkins didn't just withdraw and fall apart. She rose. This wasn't the overused strong woman cliché. This was different. It was planned. It was about getting back the version of herself she lost in the dark corners of someone else's emotional lies. You see, for Faith, healing wasn't about getting back at Kenny or bringing his name into disrepute. The goal wasn't for him to be saved, but for herself. She did this through a mix of pure grace and power. 1. Judge Faith started to subtly change the tone of her social media and public appearances. Gone were the perfectly styled couple posts, and in their place were honest reflections, motivational quotes, soft glam, and behind-the-scenes footage of her working, speaking, and mentoring young women. The tweet that got a lot of attention said, "Your peace is not negotiable. Your voice matters, and being quiet isn't always a sign of power." That one post, which had nothing negative or dramatic to say about Kenny, got over 100,000 likes and thousands of comments from women, thanking her for reminding them to choose themselves. Her platform had changed. She wasn't just a TV judge or legal expert anymore. She was becoming a voice for women who were healing in silence. She started getting invited to podcasts, panels, and speaking engagements, and she started being more open in interviews. She didn't say bad things about Kenny, but she did show us what it's like to lose yourself in a relationship where your worth is slowly and quietly chipped away. It dawned on her that she was shrinking herself to make someone else feel bigger, and that's not love. That's living. And I'm done just living. Faith started working with groups that help women gain power, heal emotionally, and reconnect with their spiritual selves. She started a mentorship program for young Black women who are going into the media and law. Third, rebuilding her image without needing approval. Many famous people would have trashed their ex in a sit-down special, a book, or a tell-all. But Faith did something different. She let her actions, her mental, spiritual, and emotional glow do all the talking. Today, she travels, works on new TV shows, mentors, and lives her life without apologizing. She also smiles more, and it's not the fake smile we used to see on red carpets. This one is real and full of peace. She doesn't have to fake a happy marriage anymore. She's just being. She is now even stronger than she was before. What can we learn from this? Sometimes the biggest lies aren't loud or obvious. They're quiet, hidden in broken promises, rudeness, and small acts of emotional neglect. But those lies still hurt, they still matter, and they still leave scars. As a judge, Faith Jenkins may have spent her career giving other people justice. But in this very private moment, in the silence of her own broken marriage, she had to give herself justice. And she did. So, here's to her, to healing, to power, and to women who walk away not because they're weak, but because they finally remember how strong they are. Also, if you've ever been like her, questioning your world, and wondering if love should make you walk on eggshells, this is to you. We want to tell you that your peace is not up for discussion. If this video moved you, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Faith's story? Have you been through something similar? Let's talk about it.